There is a particular kind of disappointment that every home gardener knows. You wait through the long weeks of spring, you water and tend and watch, and finally the tomato arrives, red and round and full of promise. You bite into it, and it tastes like nothing. Like pale, mealy, sour water wearing a tomato costume. Not like the sun-warmed, sugar-heavy fruit it was meant to be. Sweeter than a strawberry, they used to say. Not anymore. What changed is not the weather. What changed is what we pour onto our plants. Walk into any garden center today and you will find shelves lined 20 or 30 bottles deep. Fungicides, pesticides, soil treatments, many of them carrying labels with skulls and warnings and fine print instructions about keeping them away from children and waterways. The industry that sells you those bottles has no interest in telling you that the problem they are solving was often created by the solution they sold you last season. This is not incompetence. It is a very effective business model built on your not knowing what people used to know. The Amish of Lancaster County still know. They are called the plain people, and that plainness is not poverty of mind. It is a kind of radical self-sufficiency that kept them from ever becoming dependent on the bottle with a brand. When everyone else was trading in their grandmother's cures for corporate chemistry, the plain people simply kept doing what worked. They did not have the money to waste on plastic jugs, and so they never lost the knowledge of what grew freely and cured quietly. I remember a farm in Lancaster County the way you remember certain smells before you remember anything else. The stone-walled milk house sat low and cool against the side of the barn, and it smelled of cold limestone and something faintly sour. The smell of turned milk sitting in a bucket, waiting. My grandmother knew what to do with that milk. She had always known. The English world, as the Amish call the rest of us, would not catch up to what she was doing for another 100 years. The enemy has a name, and it is powdery mildew. You have seen it even if you did not know what you were looking at. That white, dusty film that settles across the surface of leaves like ash from a cold fire. It looks almost harmless. It is not. Powdery mildew is a fungus, and it feeds directly on the plant tissue beneath it, choking the leaf's ability to breathe and photosynthesize. A leaf fighting mildew is a leaf that cannot make sugar, and a plant that cannot make sugar cannot fill its fruit with sweetness. The mildew does not just look bad. It robs the tomato of the very thing that makes it worth eating. The cure my grandmother reached for was the same thing sitting in every farmhouse kitchen and every barn cooler from here to Ohio: plain milk, diluted in water. It seemed too simple to be real. The science behind it, however, is genuinely remarkable. When milk proteins make contact with sunlight, a reaction occurs at the surface of the leaf that produces what researchers describe as a natural oxidative burst, a brief, concentrated release of reactive oxygen compounds that scorch and break apart the fine threads of fungal growth without causing the plant any harm at all. The sunlight is not incidental to this process. It is the trigger. Without morning sun hitting the sprayed surface, the reaction does not fully occur. In 1999, a researcher named Wagner Bediel published findings in the journal Crop Protection that gave this old farmhouse remedy its scientific credentials. His work demonstrated that a milk-based spray, applied consistently, reduced powdery mildew infection by up to 90%. Not suppressed it slightly, reduced it by 90%. The study made no headlines outside of agricultural research circles because there is no money in publishing results that direct people toward their refrigerator instead of the garden center. The mixture is 1 part milk to 9 parts water, nothing more. The method is to spray it in the early morning when the sun is just beginning to climb and the leaves are dry from the night. The light does the work. You supply the milk and the patience. A tomato plant can be doing everything right and still produce fruit that tastes like cardboard. The leaves are green and wide, the stems are strong, the blossoms come in on schedule. But the tomatoes themselves are bland, hollow of flavor, disappointing in the way that well-nourished things sometimes inexplicably are. The factory, as it were, is running at full capacity. The problem is that the delivery wagons are empty. Sugar is made in the leaves. Every gardener knows this in a general way. Photosynthesis, sunlight, chlorophyll. The whole process working as it was designed to work. What is less commonly understood is that sugar does not travel on its own. It needs to be moved from the leaf where it was made down through the plant and into the swelling fruit. That movement is managed almost entirely by potassium. Think of potassium as the wagon driver, the one who loads the sugar at the factory and hauls it to where it needs to go. When potassium is low, the sugar stays in the leaves. The plant looks healthy. The fruit tastes like nothing. The Amish solution to this was sitting in the fireplace. Hardwood ash, the grey, fine residue left after burning oak or hickory or apple wood, contains between 5 and 6% potassium by weight, along with a significant amount of calcium. It is in a very real sense a concentrated mineral supplement drawn directly from the wood that once grew in the same soil you're trying to feed. Free, abundant, and useful in a way that no one talks about because no one is trying to sell it to you. The application is straightforward. When the first green tomatoes appear on the vine, small and hard and just beginning to form, take a half cup of ash and scatter it evenly around the base of the plant, keeping it a few inches away from the stem itself. Water it in gently. One application is usually sufficient per growing season. The caution worth heeding is this. Ash is alkaline, and too much of it will push your soil pH in a direction that locks out other nutrients. A little is a gift, a great deal is a problem. Look at the bottom of a tomato that has gone wrong in a particular way, and you will see it. A dark, leathery, sunken patch spreading inward from the blossom end. It looks like rot. It looks like disease. Gardeners treat it like disease, spraying and cursing and pulling the affected fruit in frustration. But blossom end rot is not a disease. It is a deficiency. Specifically, it is the plant running out of calcium at the moment it needs calcium most, which is when the fruit is rapidly expanding and building its cell walls. No fungicide in the world will fix a calcium shortage. The fix is calcium delivered in a form the plant can actually use quickly. Eggshells are nearly pure calcium carbonate, which is the same compound used in agricultural lime. The problem with whole or coarsely crushed shells is that they break down slowly, too slowly to help a plant that needs calcium in the next 2 weeks. The Amish approach was to dry the shells thoroughly, then grind them into a fine, talcum-soft powder using a mortar and pestle or, in more modern kitchens, a coffee grinder kept for the purpose. Powder dissolves, chunks do not. Worked into the soil around the base of the plant and watered in, the powder delivers its calcium in a form the roots can take up almost immediately. Willow water is something different. Cut a bundle of young, flexible willow branches, the thin, whippy green growth from the tips, not the old wood, and pack them into a jar or bucket of water. Let them soak for 24 to 48 hours. The water that results is not impressive to look at. It is pale and slightly greenish and smells faintly of the creek, but it is saturated with salicylic acid, which is a compound that willows produce naturally as part of their own defense chemistry, and which happens to be the same active compound found in aspirin. What salicylic acid does inside a plant is trigger what plant scientists call systemic acquired resistance. The term is worth understanding because the mechanism is genuinely elegant. When a plant detects salicylic acid, whether it produces it internally in response to attack or absorbs it from an external source, it activates a suite of defensive genes throughout its entire system. Every cell in the plant goes on alert. Proteins that block fungal invasion are produced. Pathways that would allow bacterial entry are reinforced. The plant does not wait to be sick. It prepares. Watering your tomatoes with diluted willow water is, in effect, ringing an alarm bell through the whole plant before any threat has arrived. The defenses go up. The disease finds a harder target. The last mistake is the most common one, and it comes from a place of love. People who care about their gardens water them generously, reliably, abundantly. They do not want their plants to suffer. And in doing so, they produce tomatoes that taste like the water they were given, diluted, thin, without concentration or depth. A tomato under mild, consistent water stress does something predictable and useful. It pulls whatever sugars and acids and aromatic compounds it has managed to accumulate and concentrates them into a smaller volume of fruit. The same principle governs wine grapes in the great growing regions of France and Italy, where the best vintages often come from years of dry, difficult weather. Stress is not cruelty. Stress, applied with knowledge and restraint, is the mechanism by which flavor is born. The Amish understood this intuitively because they could not afford to overmanage. They watered when the plant needed water, not on a schedule designed to make the gardener feel responsible. What all of this adds up to, the milk and the ash and the eggshells and the willow water, is a complete system of plant care drawn from things that were always within arm's reach. The milk was in the cooler, the ash was in the fireplace, the shells were on the breakfast plate. The willow grew by the creek. None of it required a purchase. None of it required a label. None of it required the knowledge to be imported from somewhere outside the life you were already living. There is a particular kind of freedom in that. It is not the freedom of abundance or of modern convenience. It is the quieter freedom of not needing to be sold something in order to grow something well. The plain people were never told that their grandmother's knowledge had been superseded. So they kept using it, and their tomatoes, in late August, still taste the way tomatoes are supposed to taste, heavy with sugar, warm from the vine, nothing like pale water at all.